Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our session. Today, we're going to be talking about how Precisely Automate can help you throughout that S/4HANA journey. I'm Andrew Hayden. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for our Automate products here at Precisely, and I'll be your host today. For those of you in the SAP community who may not be familiar with Precisely, in 2021, we acquired Windshuttle, and there's a good chance you are familiar with Windshuttle. For those of you not familiar with Precisely, we are the global leader in data integrity, and we've got about 12,000 customers worldwide. We're in over 100 countries. We're in 99 of the Fortune 100, and we've got about 2,300 employees. Precisely is trusted by many of the largest brands in the world. They trust us with their data, and many of these same companies trust us with their SAP automation. In addition to that, we work with many of the leading data providers and technology providers worldwide as well. If you have questions during this session, please type them into the chat box, into the Q&A box, and someone from Precisely will get back to you. We'll try and get back to you during the session, but if we're not able to, just be aware that somebody from Precisely will get back to you and answer your questions. One of the things that Windshuttle and now Precisely have always been committed to is empowering business teams to make an impact. And I think as we go through this presentation and talk about your journey to S/4HANA, this will be a central theme to it, is understanding how your business teams can be a core part of your success in getting from, in many cases, ECC to S/4HANA, or even doing a clean implementation of S/4HANA for the first time. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, what we're going to talk about is we're going to touch a little bit on what's happening in the marketplace. What's driving a lot of this need for digital transformation, for updating our systems to systems like SAP S/4HANA. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the 3 stages of migration as we see them, as we work through them with customers, that being the pre-migration, the migration, and then post-migration, and what are some activities and things you need to be aware of. And finally, we'll walk through the scientific drilling case study and give you an idea of how Precisely Automate helped a customer make it through their SAP S/4HANA journey. So as I said, we're going to start with what's happening in the marketplace and what's driving a lot of this need for systems upgrades and system changes. And in 2019, KPMG did their annual CEO Outlook, and they found that about 2/3 agreed with the statement that acting with agility is the new currency of business. If we are too slow, we will be bankrupt. And I think when we look at what's happened with our systems over the past couple of decades, this need for them to be more agile. We've put systems in place that tend to be fairly static. They're difficult to make changes to. And when you have sudden changes in the marketplace, as we saw in the last few years, that need to be agile, that need to be able to change your business on a dime and pivot very, very quickly has become more and more important. And not only that, there are a number of other factors driving not only the need for agility, but the need for us to have systems in place that can keep up with it. And one of the big ones is just this explosion in data. The amount of data that we are using in our businesses is constantly increasing. And we're using this data, it's fueling our decision-making processes. And when you dig into the numbers a little bit, it's kind of staggering the amount of effort that's being put into this. It's estimated that in the past year, about $1.3 trillion was spent just on digital transformation alone. Now, that's a massive amount of money. And we're not just talking about on S/4HANA, obviously. We're talking about all of the different systems and activities and consultants and services and hardware and all those kind of upgrades. So it's a huge amount of activity that's gone into digital transformation. And if you look at what's happened with, again, in the last 2 years, when KPMG did their CEO Outlook, again, during the pandemic, they found that about 80% of CEOs are accelerating their digital transformation. So they're understanding this need more than ever. Again, the pandemic kind of was this pivotal moment for many of us because we saw the shortcomings in our companies. We saw where we were not able to be agile. Our technology or our processes or our systems simply didn't allow us to maintain business continuity or respond with our businesses as quickly as we needed them to. So CEOs are recognizing this. And it's interesting because in that same survey, they found that about 2/3 of CEOs really predict that they're going to be spending more money on technology than people going forward. And I think one thing to understand about that, and you'll see this as we go through this presentation and talk more about automation and how it affects your SAP S/4HANA journey and your overall use of your SAP system, is they're not really talking about replacing people with technology. The core thing for most of these CEOs is they're looking for technologies that enable their current staffs to be more efficient and more effective. They want to be able to give them time back, to stop them from having to hunt down bad data. They want to find ways that technology empowers and enables their people, and empowers and enables their business teams in many cases to be more effective. And we'll talk about that as we go through this presentation. So when we look at that process of going through your upgrade or your migration to SAP S/4HANA, as I mentioned, it really falls into these three categories. One is that pre-migration planning process. And we really believe strongly, in having worked with a lot of customers, that that's a time when you need to have your business teams engaged. You need to be able to talk with them and understand the processes that they work through to manage their SAP data. They also want to understand that SAP data. In the migration step and what happens then, it's all about data quality. Yes, it's about speed of getting the systems migrated, but it is about that data quality, making sure you get the right best data from your old system into your new system. Or again, if you're greenfielding your SAP S/4HANA system, making sure that the initial data you put in there is as clean as possible. And then post-migration, it's making sure that you can not only do continuous improvement, but it's making sure you've got continuity across your old system and your new, making sure you're getting the same reporting, making sure that all of those factors are consistent throughout time, so that you're not having to worry about, well, our old system told us this and our new system told us that. And we'll talk about all three of these as we go through. So let's talk about pre-migration. When we look at pre-migration often starts with a review of any fundamental changes and impact that moving to an S/4HANA system is going to have on your organization. I think this is one in conversations I've had with SAP users really around the world. It seems to be that one step that they often overlook. They look at what are the implications and what are the things we need to do to move technically from EC. In most cases, it's a move from ECC to S/4HANA, but it's technically, what do we have to do? What's our IT responsibility there? But in reality, it's a huge amount of process reengineering. It's an opportunity to take a look and really evaluate, how do your processes that surround SAP work today? And what are they going to look like when you go to the S/4HANA system? Because there are many advantages you have. And what we recommend often is that you look and conduct process workshops where you're analyzing, what is the process we currently use? How does our data get created? How do we manage our data? Are we managing it in Excel or in spreadsheets that are ungoverned? Are we managing it, our review and approval processes based on email? In other words, do we have trouble with that governance part of it? And what would the end state look like, again, with the advantages that SAP S/4HANA provides? What is data entry with Fiori going to look like? Obviously, there are a limited number of Fiori apps, and it's growing every day, but it's going to change the way you do things. It's not the SAP GUI. The Fiori apps are a very different user experience in many ways. It's simplified. It's more streamlined for your organization. How's that going to work for you? What is that going to feel like? What's it going to change within your organization? And then some of the other implications for your overall business going to S/4HANA. There are many great benefits to you. And what does that real-time reporting mean for you? And it's not just about financial reports and doing your instant close or real-time close, but look at the other reports that you can do from your SAP system, which currently tend to have a lag to them. What are the things you can do operationally with S/4HANA that you could not do in your ECC system or with your systems that you used previously? Again, what is the impact of Fiori apps? And how do you use automation throughout this? And we're going to talk a little bit about what automation can do for you today through this migration process. But we have many, many customers currently using Precisely's Automate portfolio and Automate platforms really to drive efficiencies into their overall SAP processes and moving those forward, where you're going from an ECC process to an S/4HANA process. What changes? What is going to be different? And what's going to be exactly the same? One of the things that we do know, again, in talking to customers is many of those processes actually don't change that much on the creation and management side of it, especially if you're doing a lot of that data management outside of SAP. So you're using an Excel file, for instance. And we'll talk about how we've got an automation platform that genuinely can help you improve those processes, both before you migrate, during the migration, and after the migration. And the other big activity during your pre-migration processes is really data cleanup and archiving. And a couple of key things about that data cleanup and archiving step are things like you need to identify the data you're going to migrate. Chances are, especially if you've had SAP for a long time, or if you're moving from multiple SAP systems into a single SAP S/4HANA system to run your business, you've got a lot of extra data. You may have duplicates in those systems. You may have lots of different things. So you want to figure out what is the specific data that you want to migrate. How are you going to identify that? You want to identify areas where you've got a lot of problems and errors in your data. So you want to figure out what are the areas you need to cleanse? What are the areas you need to possibly use an ETL tool for, or some other form of data cleansing tool to make sure that you can check and confirm what is the right data and that what you're moving is the cleanest data possible. And then another activity is, what is the data you want to archive? And again, it goes back to that, what's the data you want to move? But the data you're going to archive really can fall into two categories. It's data that you need to be retrievable, in other words, easily retrievable. You want to be able to look it up online or something of that nature, versus long-term storage, where it may take you a day to get it, or there's time required and it's not mission critical to get it back quickly. So where does Precisely come into all of this on that pre-migration side? Well, we can help you with the process reengineering, understanding your processes and where you can, where automation can play in those. But specifically in that data cleansing and archiving part of it, our Studio tool is one that many companies have used as part of that process to be able to extract the data, make the changes they need, actually move it from one SAP system to another. So there's benefits with the Studio product. In addition, Precisely has a lot of data quality and governance solutions in our Verify portfolio that can help you as well. We're not going to talk about those, but check those out at precisely.com. I think there's many opportunities there to see how you can cleanse that data even further using those tools. But we're going to focus on Automate Studio. Now, Automate Studio is the premier Excel to SAP automation tool that you can find available. It's really great for those mass data creation and maintenance activities that you have, which is why in migration, it's a really outstanding tool. So it has data stewardship capabilities that allow you to do things like verify data or validate data against SAP before you post it. So if you've extracted data from one SAP system and you've made any changes to it or know you need to make changes to it, you can validate it and it gives you back SAP error messages. And that allows you to then make those changes in the Excel file before you post the data into your SAP system. You're either going to post it back into your old SAP system, or you may possibly use it to post into your new S/4HANA system. We have deep SAP integration. As WindShuttle and now as Precisely, we've got almost 20 years of experience automating SAP processes. We've done this for a very long time. We understand the nuances and the complexity of SAP and SAP processes. This data is the most critical data you have in your company, and you want to have a partner working with you, or a technology partner working with you that thoroughly understands SAP. And that's where we come in, because we've done this for a long time. We've got thousands of companies worldwide that we work with every day and use our tools and use Studio and Evolve, which I'll talk about in a minute, to help drive greater efficiencies throughout their SAP processes. And finally, Studio works with a low-code, no-code design. So it's very easy, again, going back to your business users, for your business users to be the ones who are developing those automation processes. So what can you do with Automate Studio? Well, like I mentioned, you can automate virtually any SAP business process across your entire ERP system. So in ECC, where you're using the various T codes and the GUI, we can automate that. And the same processes that happen in S/4HANA, we can automate those as well. We're talking about data migration and conversions today. We've got hundreds of customers who've used us for migrations, whether it's an M&A migration where they're migrating many things from other SAP systems into a single SAP systems from a company they acquired, or again, as we're talking about, moving from an old SAP system, almost always an ECC system, to an S/4HANA system, and then creating operational reports. So you know what's happened throughout the process with Studio. And what does Studio do? Well, it replaces multiple SAP screens with a business-friendly Excel screen. So you're also not having to train everybody in your organization to use the SAP GUI. There's not the complexity of those multiple screens. Everything is right there on an Excel file. And again, when you can do literally this, all of the capabilities of Excel are exposed to you. So whether you're using macros or you're doing, again, mass data movements. So you can do literally millions of records at a time, and all of that within Excel. So you have the full capability of Excel as well as that integration with SAP. So you can validate all of that data. You can move that data. You can extract it into an Excel file from one SAP system. You can do the data manipulation you need to do, and then post it back into that same SAP system or into a new SAP system. And the kind of business processes we're talking about that people generally do with Studio, in addition to the migration, are things like mass pricing changes, where you have to change thousands of prices. We have a couple of customers who are distributors that sell through major online retailers like Amazon or Wayfair. And if they have a flash sale, they have to change almost all their prices in a lot of terms. Literally, I think they've got a 48-hour window. So imagine having to change thousands of prices and doing it with the same staff you've got in only a few hours. Well, that's what they're able to do with Studio. Any additions or changes to sales orders, invoicing, plant maintenance is a big one. The complexities of plant maintenance are quite high. Personnel updates, mass data creation and maintenance, any of those kind of things. Journal entries is a big one within finance organizations. So there's a lot of different things you can do with Studio that go beyond just helping support your migration to SAP S/4HANA. And then in addition to those larger activities, one thing that we've run into, which surprises customers or frustrates them in some cases, is that in finance, you're actually forced to implement Material Ledger. Material Ledger is an amazingly powerful tool. And my understanding is in ECC, it actually can be very cumbersome and very complex to use, whereas in S4, it has been streamlined and it is much more user-friendly for doing things like margin analysis and really understanding what's going on within your manufacturing processes and with all of your materials. So it's a really, really powerful tool, and you have to implement it in S/4HANA. And there's a lot of things you can find in this book from Paul Ovegel. Paul is not paying me, but this is a fantastic book. Paul is sort of the expert on Material Ledger and how to take full advantage of it once you've migrated to SAP S/4HANA. You can find it through SAP Press, and again, can't recommend it enough. Now that we've talked a little bit about the pre-migration process, let's talk about the migration process and what you need to, how automation can help you as you go through that. One thing to be aware of, there are standard SAP tools, and they are really, really good for most things, but there are a few gaps that happen in them. And where we find customers coming back and being able to take advantage of Studio and Evolve and our other tools, and again, I'll talk about Evolve in a moment, is because these tools don't quite do everything. They do a lot, and again, really fantastic for a lot of it. They're not really good for like errors that need to be corrected if you're doing conversion to business partner. We've heard this over and over again. They kind of give you error messages back and don't really tell you how to fix it that well. So Studio is a great tool for doing that, and I'll show you an example of what that looks like. Reconciliation between FI and Material Master for that Material Ledger move. Sometimes there's a disconnect and the tools just don't handle it very well. It's something you can actually do quite easily within Studio. And then uploading some of those legacy assets. It can just be troublesome with the SAP tools. They don't handle it as well as we believe our tools can do it. So again, you're probably going to do most of your migration using those standard SAP tools, but there are areas where we can help you improve the efficiency of it and eliminate any of that manual activity you might otherwise have to do. So business partner conversion, a good example is, specify an industry where you may have everything coming out of either customer or vendor that needs to be specified. And you can do that as a mass change in Studio. So that's the kind of example that we see where customers come to us and go, I can use your tool for this. And we're like, absolutely. So the other tool that I started to talk about was Evolve. And Evolve is our business process automation platform. And it includes Studio. What Evolve gives you is enterprise-grade workflow automation. So, if you've got a complex workflow that something needs to go through, and we find this a lot in migrations where people are managing their data, again, in spreadsheets, or they're managing in a different way, but they need to move that file through a review and approval process, and they need it to be governed and tracked. Evolve is a great tool for that. Again, you get all those same robust data stewardship capabilities, you get deep SAP integration that we talked about, and it still is in a low-code, no-code design. Now, I know we've talked a lot about low-code, no-code, and if you go back to when I talked about empowering business teams, we very firmly believe that business teams being able, or having your business teams be tightly engaged or even responsible for developing the automation of processes and data processes for SAP is absolutely critical. They're the ones who are closest to it. They understand the processes, they understand the data, they know what the beginning state is, they know what your desired end state is. And the tools and the platforms that we've developed with Evolve and again with Studio within Evolve are specifically designed for business teams to be able to do a lot of this work and a lot of the activities around it. So what does Evolve look like? Well, Evolve, like I said, wraps around Studio and gives you that workflow capability. And it comes in two flavors. One is what we call Excel workflow, where it's able to take those Studio-enabled Excel files and move them through a complex workflow process. Again, review and approval is a great example. And at the end of that, once you get that final approval, the data is automatically posted to SAP, and you can set it up to attach that Excel file to that record. So you know exactly what happened. You've got that full audit trail. It makes it very easy to know who touched what, when, who did your approvals. And it's a very powerful tool, especially when it comes to audit. And for migrations like this, where you're absolutely wanting to make sure that the data that started in one system is what went to the other one, it's really important to have that kind of a governance program around that. And then the other one is what we call form and workflow. So you can create these business-friendly and in many cases role-based forms for creating data, adding data, if you've got a complex process. So account creation or account management often happens in forms where it's one record at a time, but it may have to be viewed or edited or addressed by multiple departments and multiple people in multiple departments. And you can create a role-based form system that just shows the individuals what data they need to see and asks them to fill out the fields they need to fill out. So they're not getting this giant long page they basically have to scroll through and figure out what's mine and what's not. It's a very, very powerful tool, and it gives you all those same capabilities. You can still validate against SAP throughout that process to make sure that the data that's being input is correct. You can run it through a complex workflow so that once all the data is collected, it can go through a review and approval process, very similar to what we talked about with Excel workflow. So there's a lot of power in it. There are two different ways of managing and doing that complex business process automation for your SAP data. And this gives you the flexibility. That's the beauty of Evolve. It gives you the flexibility to choose which is going to be the appropriate interface for your teams and which process. And it gives you the scalability to work across your entire SAP organization and across your entire SAP landscape. So by using a workflow, it can reduce your cycle times and improve compliance, as I mentioned. So you're able to stay on track and know exactly what happened when. It can improve data quality overall. And again, web forms give you certain capabilities and Excel files give you certain capabilities to make sure that the data is of the highest quality. And as you're going through a migration to S/4HANA, we talked about that migration step. You want to make sure that the data that gets into your new S/4HANA system is as clean and as pristine as you can make it. Yeah, and one of the things we like to talk about again is your migration to S/4HANA is something that really is it's a team effort across your entire group. it shouldn't just be limited to your IT organization. And because of the scalability of what we provide, you think about being able to make an impact at scale where those business teams are engaged. So if you can do platform administration at the highest level, you're able to manage your licenses, your security, access, any of those kind of things, single level. Your solutions authors, again, often our solutions authors for both Evolve and Studio are very close to the business. Sometimes they're SAP analysts, or they're within the SAP functional SAP team. Sometimes they're SAP super users within the business. There's many different people who can fit that solutions author role, but they're very close to the process. So you're not having to send it to, make a request to a group somewhere, whether it's within IT or at a partner or something like that, that they don't know the process. So you've got a lot of back and forth, and it becomes more expensive and it becomes more time consuming to have to do it that way than have somebody within your business actually be doing the development of those automation scripts. And then they can deploy to your business users. And one of the things we're very conscientious of and careful with is we follow your SAP permissions. So a business user, if they only have permissions to do certain SAP processes, that's all they can do. They can't do things that are outside of their what they're allowed to do already. So you can be assured that the teams and your business users, as they're going through and managing and manipulating and addressing that SAP data, are doing what they're always doing, what they've always been allowed to do, without any risk to your business of somebody coming in and doing something they're not supposed to. And one of the other things about Evolve is it gives you greater visibility into what's happening throughout these processes. So now within a process, what's the status of things. And this is important, especially when you're doing these migrations. What data has been moved? What data is in the process of being moved? Where are they? Do you have bottlenecks? Did somebody go on vacation and not tell the system, or the system is unaware of it? Has somebody left the company and there was no contingency put in place for it? So dashboards and that visibility into the process really helps you. And then you can do historical look backs and you can understand, are you getting more efficient? Are you getting less efficient? Which you don't want to, obviously. But what's happened throughout that process? So it's extremely helpful to understand this. And again, going through a complex migration and knowing where your data is or where you are in that process. So even just on understanding the archiving and the data cleanup, we can help you with that. And we can make that more efficient and more effective and obviously more compliant. And ultimately, it comes down to being more agile. Automation that you can apply throughout your SAP system. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is helping people be more agile and more efficient. And again, we do it whether you're in SAP ECC, whether you're in SAP S/4HANA, or you're moving between the two. And one of the things we can help you do is be agile in ECC, and then those automations continue to work through in S/4HANA with maybe some minor updates depending on how they're implemented initially. So being able to start small and expand or modify solutions quickly can be critical as you're going through this process. Again, when you look at migrations and the complexity in a migration, things are going to change and things are going to come up that you hadn't anticipated in that planning process. Being able to change your automation quickly, again, close to the business, can really, really help drive efficiencies into this process overall. So that's migration, where you're really looking at how do we get our data from point A to point B, into our new system at the highest quality possible. Now, post-migration, really what you're looking at are things like continuity checks. Is the data that we moved is the data that we had before the same data as we have now, or is it cleaner now? Let's make sure. What are the process changes? Obviously, we talked about, you want to go through during that planning process, identifying where you can re-engineer processes to be more efficient. Well, now's a great time, once you've gone through and had some time with your new S/4HANA system, to go back and reevaluate. Did that re-engineering really work the way we intended it to, or do we need to tweak it a little bit more? And then, like I said, implementing automated solutions. We've talked about this throughout, and what Precisely can do for you, both with Studio and with Evolve. There are many processes where what happens to that data from a creation standpoint, from a management standpoint, doesn't really change between ECC and S/4HANA. Using Excel files to create and manage data probably won't change that much when you move from ECC to S/4HANA. Being able to govern those Excel files is something that now you can do. So we can help you with that. And again, the data creation process, or a good example with Evolve, is account creation and self-service portals. So enabling customers or vendors to go in and make changes to their data. A customer needs to change a ship to address. Well, they can go in, they can log into a self-service portal, address their SAP data, and then make those changes. And you can either have it go directly into SAP, depending on what it is, or you can have somebody internally review it. But it eliminates many of those internal steps and a lot of that internal manual data entry. So those are the kind of things where we believe that automation can help drive more efficiencies throughout your organization in both ECC and S/4HANA. And that, again, continuity on your automation can be incredibly important. So I told you we're going to talk about a case study. And one of the customers we worked with for their S/4HANA migration was Scientific Drilling. And Scientific Drilling had an interesting situation that they ran into. I don't think it was the greatest one in the world for them, but turned out great. Let's just put it that way, and you'll hear that in a second. But what happened was they'd gone through that pre-migration process. They had identified what their migration plan was. They were all set to get started on it. And then they had a downturn in their business, and the decision was made that they were not going to use any outside resources. So the entire migration was going to be done by their in-house team. But one thing they decided, though, is that they weren't going to extend their deadline. They still kept the same time frame within which they were going to make this cut over to S/4HANA. So what Scientific Drilling initially started out, they tried using LSMW to make some of these migrations and changes, and they found out it just didn't work for them. And then they found Studio. And what Studio was able to help them do was do mock cycles, do the testing, do the changes, do that data cleansing, and then that migration tests, and then migrate all of their master data and transactional data using Studio alone. And they hit their deadline. So they moved over 15 million master data records into HANA, just using us exclusively. And they hit their go live date, and they continue to use Studio for many processes after this. So it's a good example of somebody who ran into a very, very sort of, they got their backs against the wall and were able to find another way to do it. So the standard SAP tools helped them to a degree, but most of their migration was actually done using Automate Studio. And we heard this from their IT manager, and what they said was, without Precisely, we could never go live on time. We could never finish our data migration conversion successfully. Without Precisely, I probably would not be working for the company anymore. Yeah, it was a really tight, stressful time for them, and we were able to help them get through it successfully. So we feel really good about that. And their situation obviously was a unique one, at least I hope so. But think about how we might be able to help your organization get through this, meet your timeframes, meet your deadlines. And what we did for them is something we possibly can help do for you on that scale, but hopefully not. Hopefully it's the smaller aspects of it. But either way, we're here to help you make that migration from SAP ECC to S/4HANA, whether it's multiple ECC systems or whether it's a single S/4HANA system. So just to wrap up, obviously, we talked about those 3 stages to go through, that pre-migration where you're looking to do, what is the re-engineering that we're going to have to do? What are the processes we're going to have to change? What are the implications of going to SAP S/4HANA versus what we're doing today? What is the data cleanup we need to do? What is the archiving we need to do? And on the finance side, be aware that material ledger is coming down the road, and what are the implications of that for where we are today, and what do we need to do to make sure we get to that successfully and simply. On the migration part of it, that data movement, making sure you have the highest quality data possible as you move from one system to the other, so that you start off with the best system you possibly can and the cleanest data in it, without having to worry about, did we move bad data? You want to make sure you're doing that cleansing part and migrating the clean data and checking on both sides. And then post-migration, it's all about continuity. Did we migrate the right data? Is our new system, is our S/4HANA system giving us the same results that we got out of the old one, or is it giving us better results, hopefully, because hopefully you've got better data. And then from an automation standpoint, each one of these three has opportunities for automation. On the archiving and cleansing, we can help you with that. On that actual data movement, as I showed you with scientific drilling, they used us for that entire migration process. And then post-migration, what does automation look like? How can we help you drive efficiency into your processes so that you're able to make better decisions and run your business more efficiently and with greater agility? And as I mentioned, we're able to work across your entire SAP landscape. So if you're looking at materials management, if you're looking at customer vendor, so business partner at S/4HANA, finance and accounting, asset accounting, you name it, anywhere that you have struggles or are burdened by processes that are too inefficient, we believe very strongly that our automation platforms can help you really get a handle on that and drive that digital transformation that you want or need in your business in order to gain a competitive advantage. And then finally, I want to leave you with this thought. This is a quote from Justin Trudeau. He said it a number of years ago, but it's still relevant today. And the quote is, "The pace of change has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again." And kind of frightening when you think about that, because it feels like everything's going so fast today. And what we think and we believe very firmly is automation is one way to help manage that constantly accelerating pace of change. Things are going so fast. And if you can automate processes and make your current people more efficient, then you can get a competitive advantage. Hopefully this entire presentation has been helpful. It's given you some things to think about as you go through this migration path. As you're working your way towards S/4HANA, what are the things that you may have been missing? Did you do that process reengineering on the front end, or even that process analysis? What are we doing? How do we do this? How do we use our SAP system and our SAP ERP system currently? What's it going to look like down the road? How much faster is our business going to have to go to keep up with the marketplace now that we've got a highly efficient, modern SAP system in place? Those are the things we think we can help you with. We believe very firmly that we can help you with. Let's definitely continue this conversation. If you'd like more information, you can go to precisely.com. You can go to our solutions section and you can find information about how we support processes across the SAP platform. And there we also have examples of demos, white papers, case studies, more information for you, not just about S/4HANA, but also in general about how we help across that SAP landscape. However, if you have a specific question, something's just sitting in your head and you're going, I wonder if they can do that, definitely give us a call or contact us through the Get in Touch form on precisely.com, and we'll set up a 30-minute talk to really get a handle on what is the challenge that you have and how can Precisely help you solve it. How can we drive greater efficiency into your organization and make your SAP system run the way you want it to run, and how you can use it to have a better business, lower your business risks, get better data, go faster. So definitely give us a call, and let's see how we can help. Finally, I just want to thank everybody for coming. I appreciate that you are here. I hope you have gotten some useful information out of it. And I hope everyone has a happy and healthy day. Thank you very much.